hope it doesn't look like I'm trying to exalt Scott LaPierre. I hope Christ is one exalted and people, look to him. I will say one thing regarding what you mentioned that's pretty interesting. The influencers that I know or authors or speakers, most of them are actually losing money to get out their messages.
Oh yeah.
So there's a few, and
To
you
bring
know this.
clarity to that.
Yeah. You have greater familiarity with this world than I do. The number of people you work with. I'm at conferences and I'm looking at people flying across the country, bringing in books, paying for the booth, basically paying to speak at this conference. And I don't know if people know that, but when
Completely.
you're going to many conferences, many of these people are paying for the hotel, the car, the plane tickets, bringing the books in. And so my whole point of mentioning this is, you said, why would people do that? Why would they lose money to get out these messages? And that, because it's that significant to them. It means that much to be able to tell people this thing that is on their heart. Now, hopefully it's something God's put
Right.
on their heart. So,
Right.
that's why people
And
reach out to you and they say, hey, Tamara, I'll pay you to help me. I
yeah.
will give you money to help me better get this message out to people.
Yeah, and
So
I want to make sure people are hearing our heart, and Scott specifically as he's sharing, right? Like, we understand that, like, the premise of that, and this is the people that I have the joy of working with, are rooted in God, and they do have that heart's desire to, like, make him know and exalt him and glorify his name, not ours, through our stories. But there's an element of personal branding that comes alongside that, right? And so we have these conversations like ego, and making sure that we are not being prideful or boastful or in greed when it comes to money, but that everything is in surrender to his will. And so we're not downcasting. That's literally my clientele. I love you guys. You guys are amazing. Your movements matter to us. But I do think that there is a really sound doctrine of being able to say and really put God in front. So let me flip the angle in which I presented that the first time and hear your heart here, because there's the contradiction of people who want so desperately to share their faith, but they aren't bold enough to say God's way on anything. And they want to be, and they are in prayer, and they are connected to the vine, and they are all of these amazing things, but they feel like they are being closed-minded or closed-hearted, or they're, to be quite frank, they're going to ruin their business, right? If they say their faith and speak to faith, because it's not something, faith in education, faith in politics, faith in blah, blah, blah. It's like all separate entities. Talk to me about, like, the power of merging those two things.
Yeah, well, and it kind of comes down to what you're living for and what you're trying to do. And so I'll use I self-published, and I tried. I don't want to bore your listeners, but
No, they love this. They're in this
okay,
journey.
so I kind of write this first book, and I'm gonna go. So I'm so naive. I'm like going to Thomas Nelson website, and it's
Yeah.
like, hey, how do I get them or Zondervan to publish this book? And everywhere it just says the same thing. We do not accept unsolicited manuscripts. And then I'm like, okay, well, they publish some people's books, so how do some authors get published by them? And then you learn you need a literary agent. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's the next step. Then I'll get a literary agent. So I sent out like 60 query letters to all these literary agents. Nobody responds. And then this one gentleman responds. This is 6 years ago, 2015, 2016. This guy responds, and he was nice. It was hurtful, but he said it was, in hindsight, it was a very good message to receive, because he said, I'm just going to let you know. And I'm not joking, Tamara. Maybe he looked at a photo of my family and like felt sorry for me or something. Thought, this guy has all these kids. I'm just going to let him know how this world works, because he's clearly pretty oblivious. And he said, I'm just letting you know, nobody's going to be interested in you. Nobody's going to respond to you because you have no platform. Now, in my mind, I'm like, I thought I hate to use that word platform. I mean, it's kind of
I know.
antithetical to Christianity and the gospel. It sounds like, promoting yourself, but for lack of a better word, that's what he said. And so I said, I'm a pastor. I do a little speaking. He's like, hey, look, publishers are looking for thousands of YouTube subscribers, thousands of newsletter subscribers, thousands of people at speaking engagements throughout the year. And I was like, wow, yeah, I'm like super far from that. And so he said, you should just self-publish. So I self-published Marriage God's Way, and then self-published some other books. And then, in 2020, this a literary agent, Blythe Daniel, takes some interest in me. And she says, I'd like to work with you. And so then she signed me, and then they republished my book, Marriage God's Way, as Your Marriage God's Way. And that was kind of my journey, a lot of frustration and just having to kind of set out and decide that I was looking at your book on Amazon, and so this world too. But when I get the whole thing I was going to say, you were real patient listening to me explain all that, was when Harvest House took interest in me. I met with their senior editor. He was in Portland, and I went with my wife, and we met with him and his wife. And I went into that meeting thinking, if they want to take my book, Marriage God's Way, which I believe is an ultra conservative biblical marriage book, and they want to republish it, or they want me to publish anything and they want me to soften it or compromise, I have to walk away. And so, and that's what I dreamt of for years, was like having a traditional publisher, being, like a legitimate author kind of thing. But it was like, if they're going to expect me to not be bold with my faith or with biblical principles, then I'm just going to have to keep self-publishing, where I can basically say whatever I want. And so fortunately, I appreciate Harvest House's integrity. They said, we'll let you stay true to the Bible. That's exactly what we want. And so I've enjoyed working with them. But I sense that temptation. Am I going to miss subscribers or listeners or views if I'm bold, or I condemn this, or I say this is a sin, or I preach this? And so people really need to ask themselves why they're doing what they're doing. I didn't want to sell more copies but reach the end of my life and have compromised. And so I'm happy to have less views or sell less copies if I can stand before the Lord someday and he can say, well done, good and faithful servant, versus, servant who compromised to get more sales or something. So
yeah, that's really good. I love that. Like, copies or compromise. I'm totally going to steal that
there you
one.
go.
It's
take
good,
it,
right?
take it. Yep.
Well, and the reason I was so patient listening to you is, one, that's our community, right? Like, founders, innovators, and trailblazers, they want to be authors, or they're already authors and they're in that journey. And I remember having that exact conversation with a couple of literary agents and publishers at a Lisa Turkhurst event called the She Speaks conference that she has every year. And the word platform was literally like everywhere in the hallways. This was in 2018. And everyone, my platform's not big enough. Your platform's not big enough. How do you get a bigger platform? I want a bigger platform. I don't know if it's the right thing to have a bigger platform, but I don't want a bigger platform, right? Platform. That's the entire conference. And I remember sitting there and being not only deflated by the amount of work that I had put in, not just to that book, but to the platform that I thought I had, right? That was really nothing at the time, and still isn't, if you look at it from the perspective of what a lot of people have. And I remember thinking that this doesn't make sense. Like, why is this the word that they're using when God is the creator of that platform and he's deposited all of these people? There was 800 women in this space. 800 women with the same exact desire to put this message out into the world and to glorify his name. Why is there this huge, like, limiting factor that we have to have a bigger platform? Isn't the book supposed to get the platform? Like, I don't get it. Right. And so I remember going home and thinking, I feel really defeated. And simultaneous to that, I did pick up an agent. Simultaneous to that, there was interest from a publishing company. And I still was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this my way, to be honest. And I'm going to steward what God has given me. And it's going to be done in a different way than what everyone else said I should do, and even what I was just taught at this awesome conference. And so I want people to hear that there are multiple ways to do things God's way. And he is going to direct that path for you, just as he did for you. He was like, you're going to do it this way for a while, and then I'm going to open this door. In your stewardship, in your obedience, in that grace, he was like, here's Harvest House, and you don't have to change anything. So there's power in listening to people's stories and listening to people's perspectives in that journey.